This time we're going to go a bit further than just installing a new set of Rails framework folders and code. This time we're now going to actually start working with the framework. In previous tutorials you'll have seen how to create a new Rails app, and I've skipped past all of those stages. And basically I've created a Rails app called article_app in the folders. So once I'm inside of that folder, I'm going to create our first piece of code, which is a controller. Now, if you're familiar with the model view controller kind of way of thinking, then you'll realize that the controller is the part that basically pulls in data, then processes whatever needs to be done, and then parcels the information up ready to be shown in the views. So to create a controller, we need to use the Rails command line application. So to do that, we use Rails and we pass it a G command or a generate command. You can use either G or generate. It knows what you mean by just the letter G on its own if you want to do that for short. Then we use the option of controller, and then we put the name of the controller, which in this case is articles. So we're saying generate a controller called articles. We run that and it generates a load of code for us. And inside of our Rails application, you'll see that inside of our app folder we have a folder called controllers, and inside of there we should have a controller. Now, as well as that, you'll see that inside of the views folder there's an articles folder being created, and that should be empty when you first create it. I've already put some HTML in there because I want to be able to demonstrate some points to you later in the tutorial, but we'll come to that shortly. So inside of the articles controller you should see some code, a couple of lines, class articles controller, which is derived from application controller. Now, application controller is this RB file here, and this is just a controller that's been derived from the action controller base class, and that basically means that it gives this controller class a base set of functionality that all controllers on Rails applications should have. So with that, we then need to do a little bit of configuration. Now we've created the controller, and inside of our roots, so inside of our config roots file, we need to add some routing so that the web framework knows about this and how to actually handle calls to its URLs. So to do that, we add one line: resources articles. And that just basically lets it know that there's a controller called articles and that it has a set of resources, in other words URLs. So we haven't actually defined any URLs inside of here, but now that we've got the routing set up, we can now define things. Now the controller comes with 7 different actions that it can do, or 7 different URLs if you want to think of it like that. Now they range from being able to just show a list or a bog standard page of things to showing a detail page and various other things, and I'll take you through what they are. So the first one we'll look at is the default action, which is index, which is the case with all web pages. You always have an index, and that's always the default. And this is basically in our application, because it's an articles controller, this is where we're going to show a big list of articles on the web page. Now, we won't be showing it in this tutorial, but as the tutorial series progresses, you'll see that this is how we're going to use this. But today I'm just going to take you through the basics of what the controller does and how it works under the Rails system. Now, if you've used other web frameworks or programmed in other different web languages like Python or like PHP, then this different URL system is slightly different from what you're used to. And the reason for that is because you only get 7 different URLs. You can't define custom functions and expect it to work. And the reason for that is because Rails follows a RESTful URL approach. So if you're not familiar with RESTful URLs, then it's probably a good idea to pause the video and go and do a little bit of Googling. But basically, what this does is it allows us to have a page that shows information, a page that shows details, a page that can create a new record. We have then a URL that can be used to actually respond to what was created on the new page. We have an edit page. Then we have an update URL that can respond to what's done on the edit page. And then we have a destroy URL. So I'll just quickly add them in and see if I can explain a bit more detail how that works. So there's the show. There's the new, the create, the edit, the update, and finally the destroy. Now, like I say, index is the first page you'd see, so that's where we'll list things. Or if we were going to make this a bog standard website and it was just a home page, that's likely where you would put your home page, on the index action. The show action is very much to do with when you have, for instance, a list of items on a shop, on an online shop or something like that. You may have a specific item and you want to click through and look at the details of that item, then this is what that action would do. It would show the details of a specific item, which you would pick from the database. The new handler will basically handle just putting a form or some way of getting user input onto the web page in a form that connects with the framework and with the database backend. Once you've clicked a submit button or something like that on the new page, it doesn't pass back to this new action. It actually passes forward to the create action. So new creates the form or makes a form for people to put information into, but create actually does something with the form. And create will usually just basically create a record and then do some kind of redirection through to the index page normally. The same goes for the edit and update. Now edit takes an argument of what specific record you want to edit, and it will populate a form and display it to the user. Once you press submit on edit, instead of passing back to edit, the same happens with new. It passes its information instead of back to edit to it goes to the update method action instead. And then update seeks out the record from the database, updates the fields and saves it, and then does a redirect back to the action or some other page depending on what you want to do. So these two kind of work in pairs together. So edit, that creates the form, update reacts to the new input. New creates the form, create reacts to the new input. So interesting little setup there. That isn't necessarily something you'd come across in other frameworks or other languages. So if you're coming here from being a web developer in a different language, that's something that you might find unusual. But it actually makes a lot of sense once you get to work with it. And the final action we've got is the destroy action. Now destroy basically does what it says on the tin, so to speak. You more or less just pass it an ID for an object, it will delete that object, and then it will redirect somewhere else, probably back to the index again after it's deleted that. So that's literally for the destroy method, and that's what would qualify as an HTTP delete in RESTful kind of terminology. So that's the default set of actions that you get. Although you can actually define other functions within here, you may not want to do that. If you've got something that does an unusual set of functionality, it might be better for you to put them inside of the helpers file. And this is where you can just make a load of functions. This is where you can make a load of functions that'll do stuff, and then you'll be able to use those functions inside of your controller. We're not going to make any helpers for this because the app that we're going to build doesn't require any, although I will be doing some tutorials in the future to deal with how to make helpers and the ins and outs of that. But for now, we're just going to leave it at the bog standard controller. What we are going to have a look at, though, is views. Now, in relation to these actions, the views basically have 4 different sets of HTML. The reason why there's only 4 when we actually have 7 different actions is because not all of them require HTML output. For instance, the create action doesn't ever really show anything. It does a job and then it redirects through to the index. The update doesn't show anything. It does a job, updates, and pushes back to the index. So it doesn't need an HTML file. What does need one is the edit method, the edit action, the index, obviously, the new action, and the show action. They can have views because they're likely to show information. New can show a form, as can edit. Index will show a list of stuff, and show will show specific information for one particular item. So what I've done is I've basically added in a little bit of HTML so that we can tell the different views. Okay, so that's a little bit about how the controller works. We're not actually going to build any functionality in it, other than we're going to do a quick test to see if it actually works. So if I go back to my Ruby on Rails page, and if I make sure the server has started, Rails server, or Rails S if you want to do that for short, make sure that works. Yeah, it did. So now if we go to articles, this is the index page, which is what we've put on here. And if we go to the different URLs, we've got the show URL, or the show action rather. We've got the new action, and then we've got the edit action. And the bit where we put in the roots about the resources articles is basically so that the framework can look through this articles system and tell us, or tell from what we set up in there, what's available. So that when you start typing in URLs at the top here, or when you start making hyperlinks on your pages, it knows how to route through to the correct method. So basically it knows that when I type in just articles on its own in the URL, it knows that I mean the index, and so on and so forth. And in the same way, because these views have actually been defined underneath the articles folder, they will also automatically be associated with the name of each of the actions. Now, one thing to notice is that this is edit.html.erb. Now, ERB stands for Embedded Ruby. Now, Ruby can be embedded into the HTML as well as just have Ruby scripts. The way that you use that is very similar to some other languages that you might have used it in if you've done any web development in the likes of PHP, etc. In that, you basically include functionality into the pages and you encase them in some tags. Now, I'll just quickly take you through a couple of tags. The first way is just basically to close, I don't know, say we have articles. We can do a loop. And then we use the percentage greater than to close that tag. And in Ruby, obviously, we have to end with an end on the end. That's too many ends in one sentence, but never mind. And that's how we define functionality. So this is basically, a for loop in another language. If we wanted to output something, we would use the less than percentage, but then with an equal on it. And then we could do article, title, if we had one like that. So we can access the object's variables and output it into the HTML. And then this particular part of the code would output HTML. Because this line doesn't have the equals there, it doesn't output. It just simply defines some Ruby functionality that we want to perform. This is the way that we actually push out information. So in the next tutorial I'll be demonstrating how to use that sort of embedded Ruby tag in your views. Okay, right. Just check that there's nothing else that I need to cover. Nope, I think that's everything. Okay, right, well that's the end of this second tutorial on Ruby on Rails. I hope that you enjoyed this and I hope that you learned something from that, and if you did, then please click the like button. If you want to know more about any of the tutorials in this series, then please click the subscribe button and we'll send you a notification as soon as there's a new one out. I will be doing this weekly, so hopefully this next tutorial will be published next Sunday. Thanks for watching.